Hey, sorry I'm late.
Very helpful, as always.
Well, hello, good evening. I'll do a gavel with this, although it's not an official regular board ed meeting, but glad we're all here. Good evening. We are here for our West Hartford Public Schools 2025-2026 Budget Workshop number 1. Let us first begin with the roll call. Oh, mine, Miss Charlotte's not here, so I will ask for us just to name who is here. I know, she does such wonderful things. We'll just acknowledge who is here with us for this board workshop. And starting to my left, please.
Gail Harris here.
Ethan Goldman.
Latoya Yagaloff.
Lorna Thomas Farquharson.
Shannon Marimon.
Jason Gagnon.
Claire Nezarella.
All right.
And I get to participate. I'm excited in the roll call.
Yes,
I never
indeed.
do this. Paul Vicina,
All
Superintendent.
right,
Thank you.
thank you. And so with that, we know that the last time we were together, we received a presentation from our superintendent, and we all received a lovely binder with rich information. And this is an opportunity for us to go into more granular detail to learn more of the contents of this binder and for us to ask questions that may come about. And so without further ado, I'll pass over to our superintendent, Mr. Vicinas.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here, and thanks for those in the audience. Most especially, I'd like to, again, reiterate my thanks to not only the entire team here in front of us, and you know everyone. I'm excited to have them all present, although some will speak more than others tonight, just based on roles and responsibilities as it lives within the budget. But again, a huge shout out not only to Liz, but to the entirety of our business and finance office for all of the amazing work that they have done in the preparation of this budget and the budget recommendation. And a special thanks as well to team members here, Gail, Shannon, Lorna, and in our audience today, Jason. We attended our first community workshop this very afternoon, up at Bishop's Corner at the Senior Center. And I thought while it wasn't a blowout crowd, I thought it was very strong public engagement. The questions that were asked by our community members were very, very thoughtful. And I appreciated the opportunity because I have received a number of emails. I believe the board has received some, and we've gotten some into the budget email address as well. So I will be forwarding those to all board members so that you can have visibility on those. And I just apologize, I haven't had the opportunity to do that prior to this evening. I would let you know that the majority of questions that have come in at this time focus in and around class size, and there have also been some questions in and around our gifted and talented program cuts. So those are all things that we'll have the opportunity to discuss tonight in greater detail, but I will make certain that you have 100% visibility on every communication. With that said, as is our practice, the team will go through each section of the budget. They have prepared for you sort of a Reader's Digest version to help go through all the major components. But as components are gone through, if in your deep dive of the budget there's something more specific, tonight really is the opportunity to address questions that you may have. I think the questions typically fall in kind of one of two categories. There'll be clarifying questions. What's this line item? What's this mean? Kind of a thing that are typically fairly easy for us to answer right here on the spot. And then if there are more complex questions in terms of something that, what if we were to do X instead of Y? How would that impact Z? Those are things that we can take away, perform the necessary research on, certainly provide you an answer in the interim as quickly as we can, but at a minimum, we would bring those, and regardless if we were able to provide that, we would bring those back at the second workshop, remind everyone in the viewing public about the question, and then provide the full board the information at that time in order to enable the discussion that obviously needs to happen in the public setting. So that's kind of how things will go. I will do my best not to jump on people, but I may chime in from time to time. But barring any questions about how we will proceed, I will be excited to turn it over to the team, and I think Liz will take lead with the conversation.
Good evening. Before we get into the detail, I just wanted to take a moment to remind you of how these workshop summaries are laid out, just so that we can all follow along. If you turn to the first page, you will see that each page is a summary of one of the budget sections in our book. So for example, by looking at page 1, you'll see at the top that this page deals with regular instruction at the elementary level. At the top, it references pages D4 and D5, so that if you'd like to follow along in the budget book itself, you'll know what page we were on. Each summary page starts with staffing information, looking at adopted, current, and then the proposed budget. We'll talk about program changes. We'll look at the actual budget dollars and speak a little bit as to the reasons for the various increases. And we'll go through all of our regular instruction, and Melissa will deal with our special instruction. As Paul mentioned, we're happy to take questions along the way, but if there is some detailed information that we don't know offhand, I will keep track of questions and make sure that we get answers back to you for the second workshop. Very good.
Well, good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm pleased to talk with you about regular instruction, starting with the elementary school students in the elementary school program. Looking at your board, your supplement or the document on page D4 and D5, you will see that our budget projection for next year would be a reduction of 2 regular classroom positions over the adopted budget from 24-25, a reduction of 2 positions in that line. We also have in the next line an increase, a maintaining of the current teacher in residence program at 2 individuals. This is a program, CREX Teacher Residency Program, which is an alternative route to certification program focusing on diversifying our teaching staff across the state. There's also another minor adjustment in physical education that is very minor, 0.03 reduction, and that would come from a little bit of efficiencies we think we can find and some changes in the program, minor changes.
And as we look at the budget figures for the elementary section, you'll see that all of our budgets are broken up into 3 categories: salaries, operating expense, and equipment. Clearly, for a school district, the salaries are the major component, and so you will see most fluctuations that we'll discuss really have to do with salaries and staffing levels. So you'll see that for this program, our salaries are going up 4.4%. That reflects our contractual collective bargaining increase for our teachers, librarians, and our paraprofessionals, offset by the slight reduction in positions that Ann discussed. From an operating expense level, we have just a slight reduction of 0.8%, just based on anticipated needs at the elementary school level for the upcoming year, and a very small appropriation for equipment, just about $1,100, that we use to replace outdated items as needed. You may recall that we settled our WHEA contract this past fall, I guess it was, and our market rate settlement was 4.82% is the estimate. That's going to vary by program depending on the actual teachers assigned to each category, but you can kind of use that as a guide as we're looking at some of our salary percentage increases.
Can I piggyback one thing? Prior, I apologize. So the one thing I just wanted to mention, as Ann showed, from adopted budget to current budget proposal, that 198, that top line on page 1 for classroom teachers, that's a budget savings of 2. But from current status, as I think I mentioned in our budget summary or in my budget presentation, our current staffing levels are actually 3 sections above. So we'd be realizing a decrease of a total of 5 teachers from current staffing levels. And since class sizes have been a question that have come up, I wanted to just provide some clarifying information. We're staffing for 196 sections, and I know in the data supplement, I think, which is what some of the viewing public has referenced online and concerned, you'll notice that that's a projected enrollment for October in the data supplement, I believe one of the first pages, and it reflects a projection of 193 sections with 3 sections eligible to give for breaks. And we do anticipate there would be some breaks, especially in some of those schools and in some of those grades where there are higher projections. We would distribute those breaks as we always do. This is just how we practice, based on an ongoing monitoring of, do those enrollment projections turn into actual enrollments? Do the number of kids that we think show up? Do we get adds in unanticipated places? And then we assign those breaks appropriately and equitably. So if we're gonna break one at a particular number, we would try to look at all and treat all schools with those same conditions equally.
Question, when you say breaks, I assume you mean additional section?
Section breaks, yeah, I apologize. So if you have, for instance, let's say you had 50 children at a second grade level, we would break that into 2 sections. 50 children, we'd break that into 3 sections. 2 sections would be 25. That would be too large in second grade, so we'd break that into 3 sections. If we were down at 40, we'd be okay. Once we start to crest over 40, creep up to 42, 44, we're starting to worry if we're going to need to break out into an additional section.
I just want to make sure I have the right term.
Understood.
Gail, yes.
Thank you. I just had actually 2 questions on this. In teacher in residence, it says that we adopted in 24-25. I'm assuming that's one position. but we actually have 2 positions?
Yes. We had, this is a program that comes to us where the candidates, we don't always know at this point the candidates that will be available, but we did have one candidate available that could go into the program. I believe we had 2 in the previous year, and so when a candidate became available and we were able to staff that at what had been previous levels.
So when you say adopted, does that mean that in our 24-25 budget, we adopted 1 spot? So then how do we actually pay for 2 spots if we hadn't put it into our budget?
Much like, we have, at times, have to make adjustments in other lines to make that happen, but these are usually small adjustments that we can make when the opportunity presents itself.
Okay.
Basically making sacrifices in other areas in order to accommodate
sorry?
that. Making sacrifices in other areas in order to accommodate that.
Okay. And then I had just one other question about the salaries at the bottom of the page. Is the benefits in that number, or is that in the operating expenses, or in neither?
So the amount in the salaries is solely salaries. And as we get to the general support section at the back, we will talk about benefits. We budget benefits all in one line item. All of the medical expenses are together, so they're not broken out by category.
Okay, so it's somewhere else.
It's somewhere else in
And
the
what
back.
what is actually what is in that operating expenses?
So operating expenses are instructional supplies that we may need for classrooms. It can be textbooks. It can be all of the tangible items that you need to conduct class. And then when we get to the support services area, it's going to be things that could be rental expense, it could be utilities, really anything needed to operate our buildings.
Latoya.
Just for some clarity for myself, what does it mean when it's like 31.9 or 12.03? Because these are positions, right? So what does it mean when it's over that, but it's not the next number, like 6.35 for world language? I guess I'm trying to understand 0.35 of a person.
Correct, but we do have, it's not a small person, no. It is a part-time. And so you might have a 12 full-time people and a 0.6 teacher, a part-time teacher.
Just at what level are you eligible for benefits? How many hours per week?
You have to be a 0.5 or greater.
Claire.
So tonight's meeting started in section D. Will you be addressing or talking about section C?
We don't typically go through that in detail, but if you have questions on section C, I'm happy to address those maybe
Yeah, I'm
at
just
the end.
confused
or-
about all the nutrition services. It's in the pages C1, C2, but then when you get to C5, C4 and 5, it's not on there. And I'm just trying to understand why all the cafeteria.
So if you look at page C1, in the top left corner, it says combined funds.
Okay,
Do you see that?
right.
Right, so those are all of our funds. That includes the general fund and any other fund that we're looking at. So that can be grant funds, the nutrition services fund, it includes information on our utilities, et cetera. As you continue on, when you get to page C4, this is only the general fund, and it says that in the top left. And so we provide a summary for both. We really spend the majority of our time talking about the general fund because that's the one that we're primarily concerned with. The others, are more typically funded with grant revenue or with, pay-to-play fees or that type of thing. So we do talk about them a bit when we get to section G.
Okay.
But we try to provide a summary for you with both a combined and a general fund level.
And is that why, like, nutrition services is separate in the financial report?
Exactly.
It's not part of the,
Not part of the general
so
fund.
all salaries, all food services costs are all covered in the non-general fund?
Correct,
Thank you.
of course.
Jason?
Said this many times before that math is not my strong suit, but on the changing, so a reduction of 2 classroom teachers and then 5 from current staffing levels, what actual savings are we realizing there?
So the figures that you see at the bottom are, it's adopted versus budget. So that difference is looking at what was adopted last year, which would be the figure there that you see of, in the example you gave, 198 classrooms, versus what we are proposing, which is 196. So what you're seeing in the variance column is, our collective bargaining agreement increases for existing staff, less the positions that are in that difference column. Does that make sense?
It,
I'm gonna
it
add-
does, but financially it doesn't to me.
And
So
then-
I know overall we have an
100K
increase
a
because we
person.
negotiated,
Right.
the
Yeah,
salaries.
let me
So-
add this if I may, and this might help you. If you imagine, I'll keep the numbers really simple. If you imagine we had 10 teachers, here in March, I was proposing 10 teachers, and as a team, we get to the summertime and we realize we need an 11th teacher. So because we need it, we go ahead and program for it, and we'll find a way to find the savings for that, because you've already passed the budget. I'm not coming back to you asking you to open the budget, re-vote on a budget. When we get to this point in the following year, if our staffing levels are such that I need to maintain that 11th teacher, now I'm coming to you and I'm not saying, oh, no change from what I'm currently doing. I'm sort of sharing that in my presentation so that you have a picture of the impact. But when we're at this level of the discussion, this is what you approved last year at 10. I added an 11th, and now I'm putting that 11th in. So now I want to pay for that 11th, not out of some other place that I was able to carve out the savings. I'm gonna pay for it here. So the ebb and the flow, that some of what you'll see here, it's the decrease is less. But somewhere else, I'll realize savings because I already stole money from somewhere else in order to find the savings for the 3 teachers that were over in the budget currently. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just kind of looking for a number for, we're reducing, the 2 teachers here. What number is that?
So we value a teacher at 75,000 in salary, 25,000 in benefits. So it's 100,000 overall. In this line, it would be 75,000 because all the benefits are in a different line.
Seeing that we're on the elementary regular instruction, will this be the time that any discussion about class size will happen, or is there going to be a time later?
I think you could ask that question now.
Okay.
If I may, so I think, yes, we certainly want that question. I just wonder if we have received additional information, if that may help inform how we ask the question as well. So I defer to you if you want to ask now, so be it, but we may get more additional information that may help us. All right. Any other questions?
Are they going to give their preference?
Yes, because, yes. So any other questions imminent? All right, please continue. Thank you.
Okay. All right, am I on? Yes. If you would move to the next page in the supplement, which corresponds to D20 and D21 in your book. This will be regular instruction in the middle school level. And you will see, under the teaching line, we have an increase over the adopted budget of 4.55, and that is related to an increase in enrollment in the schools, where we will add a team at one of our middle schools because of increase in enrollment there. It's not a full team because we can share a staff member. There's some people that can be de-teamed and shared, so it turns out to be on the FTE line a 4.55 person increase. We will see a very slight reduction through some minor efficiencies in the unified arts, and that will result we also, in the reading line, we had an adopted budget of 5. We had a small need for increase there, and that will return to 5 in this proposed budget. And so This line, middle school instruction, will result in a 4.49 increase in teachers. And Liz can go through the salary numbers.
Yep, and the corresponding budget for this section, as we look at salaries, you can see that this is an increase in our salary line item of 5%. That is our contractual increase per the WHEA collective bargaining agreement, plus 4.5 positions as Ann detailed for you. As we look at our operating expense, that is up $10,000. That included a higher requested appropriation for instructional supplies at the middle school level, and we have just a minor $200 increase for equipment at the middle school level. So overall, middle school is going up 4.9% for the upcoming year.
So I see for the enrollment, you have elementary going down 20 students, and then middle school is increasing by 14. I'm assuming that the teams were over capacity before, because 14 students. So what is the typical team size, and how many teachers on a team, and how many students does a typical middle school team have within their team?
It's good that you point that out, because the increase isn't dramatic, but it depends on where the increase is. And King Philip had been operating with a split team, but their increase is more for next year, so they need to add a team there. And that team is usually in the 95 to 100 student range. And typically it is English, social studies, math, and science. World language can be split across teams, because there's more than one world language, and you can split that person. So it's not a 5-member team; it's more of a 4-point-something member team when you add. And the team is usually between 95 and 100 students.
I'm going to follow up. And Bristow right now is one team.
One team per grade.
Sedgwick two.
Sedgwick has 3 teams per grade.
3 teams, and now King Philip has 3 full teams.
It's proposed to have 3 full teams next year. This year, I believe it was at 2.7.
Okay. And just curious, Bristow at one point had 2 teams?
1.5 per grade. The Bristow was originally designed 140 students per grade.
Bristol had 420 students between the 3 grades. They're now at 315.
Okay.
So yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions regarding this? All right, please continue. Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to page 3 in the supplement, which corresponds to D 38 and 39. Topic we're looking at today is regular instruction in the high schools. Here you will see that in the high schools, we look to realize a 2.47 FTE decrease. That is due to changing enrollment. It is projected to have a staffing ratio at 17 students per FTE. It's a reduction that is split among all areas, small reductions in all areas to realize this 2.47 reduction. We will also have a small reduction in staffing at the Reach Alternative School, and it's going to be created from a newly created department supervisor position that you'll see later, with some reductions that will be offset by teachers. But that will result in a 0.2 decrease in staffing at Reach.
Inconsistent with that change in staffing level, you see that our salaries for the high school are increasing, but only at 2.4%. And that the operating expenses and equipment at this level are relatively consistent, no major changes for the current year.
Any questions? Thank you. Please continue.
No questions? Okay, then we'll turn to page 4, which corresponds to D 70 and 71 in the book. Okay, and this is regular instruction system-wide. And here I'll turn our attention to, in the gifted and talented teacher line, we will see a minor reduction of 0.7 FTE in gifted and talented, which will really be through efficiencies in scheduling of enrichment programming in the elementary school. Our Quest teachers have a designated caseload of students who have been accepted into the Quest program that they directly teach, but they also provide enrichment supports in classrooms. And we will look to realize savings there in some efficiencies in the enrichment program. We'll see a small increase. Really, it's flat from the current status, but it's a small increase from the adopted budget of 0.4 teachers in ESOL, and that is a result of increased students who have ESOL services. And you will also see a reduction. This is a planned reduction in counselors. This had been a planned reduction in counselors at the middle school level by 1 FTE. This was a step-down program, still from the previous era of additional funding that we had been stepping down for a couple of years now, and this will be the final step down there.
And you'll see that our salary variances support both the contractual increases for the appropriate unions, offset by the reduction of the 1.3 positions that Ann detailed. In addition, we have just a very slight reduction in our operating expense that relates to a reduced request for supplies in our counseling department of, as I said, just about $1,000. So an overall increase for our system-wide programs of 3.6% for the upcoming year.
Jason.
So I think in some of the initial correspondence we've been seeing, I think there's some confusion about the reduction, the 0.7 reduction FTE for Quest. And so as I understand it, this is not going to impact kids who are enrolled in Quest. This has nothing to do with their programs, their activities. This would be the enrichment aspect of it, where they go into general education classrooms and kind of share some of the other things that are going on in Quest with that general population.
Absolutely, and we wouldn't look to eliminate that at all. We just look for efficiencies within that and within the scheduling of that so that we could realize a small savings, but it will not affect the Quest program.
And just as a follow-up, we had some feedback earlier today at the afternoon session that was held with the community, where there appears to be a belief that Quest funding has gone down over the years, that there's a trend in downward funding. Is that accurate?
I have to look at the book. There is this proposed reduction, and I believe there was a proposed reduction 2 years ago. But that was also a very small reduction as well. I don't believe it was a full person.
I don't believe it was a full person 2 years ago either, but we can get that history for you.
We can get that for you, but really, the Quest funding has dropped as our enrollment has dropped.
Right.
And at no point have we impacted or cut any programming. It's just this other stuff that they were doing as well.
So supply is meeting demand. Demand has
Supply
gone
is meeting
down.
demand. It's
Correct.
just sometimes we have excess supply that we're taking out of the system.
And I remember last year you spoke of the counselors coming in and teaching lessons that were turnkey. And from what I understand, in a normal classroom, the differentiation that takes place is both in scaffolding for your struggling kids and also offering enrichment opportunities for kids in your class that do get through things quickly. It's kind of part of what a teacher does, is meet the needs of everyone in the room. So this enrichment that you have now, they'll still get that, but teachers are given tools and they know how to do a lot of this enrichment themselves.
Yes, teachers are trained in differentiation, and we encourage more strategies for differentiation when you find children who have different needs. So that will continue. The enrichment portion of gifted and talented will also continue. We will look for efficiencies, certain kinds of savings that can be realized, but it's also affected by a little less demand too. But the Quest program core will not be affected.
This is a request for the next meeting, because I went through, after I got the schedule this afternoon, and try to map out, I counted 1,600 employees, and just try to figure out how many are directly teaching, how many are indirect teaching, how many are supervising, how many is administrative. Is it possible in the totality in pupil services?
Yes,
to do
there's
that?
actually a schedule in section B of the document that lists out all of the employees, and it's subtotaled by certified staff versus non-certified staff. It details out administrative.
Which page?
It's in the B section, B.
Section, okay. The what?
It is B. It is not B, it is C. There we go. C 12 and 13. So you'll see what this schedule does is it shows you what was adopted for 24-25 and what we currently have.
Yeah.
It gives the proposed budget, and then it does two variance columns, one from adopted and one from the current change. And so you'll see at the top, it has non-administrative, non-supervisory, and it lists all of the teachers and does a subtotal. It gives us our pupil services personnel and gives a subtotal and goes down and then provides information as to our administrative personnel comprised of department supervisors, the superintendent, principals, et cetera. And then the detail on page C13 are staff who are not certified, and again gives the detail of that. But if there's additional information or something in particular you're looking at, but you can see here for regular instruction, we budgeted for 293 teachers.
Yeah. I was looking more for what the percentage is, but I can take it from this or just to get an overall feel.
Okay.
All right. See how far off I am. Thank you.
And then I'm curious about counselors, ESOL, and gifted and talented all being on the same page in that, from what I gather, these are all non-mandated. These are all services that, I mean, why are these groups put together? And from that standpoint, the ESOL teachers, who is their director? Who is their supervisor? The counselors, is that pupil services? Why are these in this area all clumped together but not part of pupil services? And is ESOL not mandated? Is that why it's in this area?
ESOL, I'll take a couple of your questions and then turn it to Liz to explain how they're grouped or why they're grouped the way they are for budget purposes. But ESOL is mandated, and they have a curriculum specialist who leads their area, and that is overseen by our director of secondary education, Mrs. Eileen Eustace oversees the curriculum supervisor and the ESOL teachers, and that is a mandated program.
So the secretary supervises the
Well, their ESOL teachers are K-12, so it's a whole K-12 program. The counselors have a department supervisor, Mrs. Patty Pyrus, and she oversees all counselors. And that, so we have high school counselors, middle school counselors, and a small number of elementary school counselors. You asked about gifted and talented. Well, gifted, it is required that we identify students as gifted and talented. It is not required that we program for them, but we do program them for them in West Hartford. And they are overseen by the Director of Gifted and Talented, Mrs. Mary Thompson.
And then typically, how many people would a supervisor or director supervise?
There's some good variance, but we have some department supervisors who oversee 25, 26 people in some cases. There are 18 ESOL teachers currently. So there's variance. I can't give you a true figure, but I can tell you that it can be up as, I've seen as high as 28, 29 people.
And I think there's a difference between supervision of a program and then an evaluation caseload. So our administrative staff, our administrators obviously all evaluate, all the teachers, and we need to identify assignments. But some of the variation in the size, of an evaluation caseload, or even in the size of a department, there's also the supervision of a program. So I can picture, we have a department supervisor that's a K-12 supervisor, supervises teachers across, world language, all of our elementary schools. There are more people in the world language department than it is possible for her to evaluate, but her responsibilities and the structure of her job, she's overseeing the curriculum, she's evaluating an average size caseload for a department supervisor, and then has, input into different building leadership inputs in terms of when the typically at the secondary level, when they're calling a meeting and they're engaging their full leadership team on decision-making, things that might impact a department.
Any other questions? Yes, Shannon.
Can I just confirm, does the director of gifted and talented supervise anyone beyond the 8 members of that team?
Yes,
or
she does.
What's the total?
I'd have to check the total, but her supervision case, so she, as Paul appropriately said, you evaluate the program, you oversee the curriculum for the program, and then you have a caseload of people to observe and evaluate. She does have additional staff, and I believe the
Arts and music.
Arts and music area that she helps out, because it's a large group over there and one supervisor, so there's some shared. But I can get you her number. Julia works really hard in the fall to make sure those are pretty equitable numbers, and we can look it up.
Any other questions? All right, please continue.
All right, we will be moving on to page 5 in your supplement, which corresponds to page 79 to 81 in your book. Okay. And this is supervision of instruction for the district. And so we have a little bit of a difference here in that we will see a slight increase in department supervisor role from current and adopted, and that is reflective of a new department supervisor with administrative responsibilities in REACH. This person will also do some teaching, so they'll have part-time teaching load, and they will do some administrative supervision at our REACH program, which is on the Conard campus. It's dropout prevention program and alternative learning environment for our students. We will see a decrease in teachers to offset some of that increase, and that will come in the form of some of our department supervisors who will be picking up teaching sections to offset some of that. And then we will have a small increase on our non-certified support staff, which is, I believe in this case, teaching assistants, and pairs and teaching assistants are often called non-certified support, and it will be in the teaching assistant line, increase of 2 over adopted, but it is our current level of staffing.
So this is a change that I mentioned briefly. We've been playing with our supervision model at our alternative high school for a couple of years, trying to help it. And it's not that we haven't had the right people or anything like that. It's sort of this finding a model where we can have boots on the ground on a consistent basis. So we've been sharing supervision from this most recently assistant principal over at Bristow, whose assignment was part-time at Bristow and part-time over at Reach. And just the nature of building supervision, as you imagine, anytime you have to be away from the building, that's of course when something's going to happen where your presence was needed. And so we've really been looking at how can we adjust the assignments in as cost neutral a way as possible. And I think that we've got a means by which to do so that'll, it's going to add a little in this line, subtracts from another line earlier that you saw when Ian mentioned it, I think on the high school pages. And so it's not perfectly cost neutral, but it's a minimal cost to be able to solve a supervision problem and be able to provide consistent supervision with boots on the ground in both locations.
Gail and then Ethan.
Thanks. I had a question in the teachers that is in that list. I wasn't sure why they're in that list and what are those teachers? Because shouldn't they be in the, wouldn't they be in the other lists before on the other pages?
So these teachers are a portion, and Liz, make sure I have this right.
So those
These
are
are
the instructional coaches in your office.
instructional coaches in my office who are teachers, but they're in central office. So that's why they're not on the elementary.
They're in what office?
This office, central office, my
Oh,
office.
okay.
Yeah, we have a townwide curriculum specialist for math and science, townwide curriculum specialist for literacy and social studies. We
So
have
I thought our curriculum specialists went away and we
our
made them.
building-based curriculum specialists. Yeah, these are folks who work directly in the curriculum office, and they maintain that title. But we had 11 in our last thing. We replaced the 11 building-based curriculum specialists
Right.
with 11 elementary assistant principals. We maintained, as Ann mentioned earlier, we have a teacher leader position, a curriculum specialist for ESOL, who's ESOL certified. That's overseen by Eileen Eustace. We have folks at the elementary that support Melissa Behrens in elementary ed for the content areas, for all the various content areas at the elementary level.
These are teachers that are not teaching, they're in some kind of an administrative role, is that correct, or?
Well, I'd be very cautious to ever say they were in an administrative role, especially with my dear friends from the WHEA. They're in a central office role where they have oversight of curriculum, so.
Okay.
So the non-certified support staff, there's 165, which is, I calculate, is more than 10% of the total staff. And then 2 pages later, for the pupil services, there's another 279. Is it possible for the next round to just get more definition? Because that's 25% of the staff.
25%.
When you say a definition, do you just mean more detail of who's in there?
What roles? Yeah.
Yeah,
Are they
so-
all like paraprofessionals,
So if you look on page D81,
the 81?
which is what this summary page refers back to in the book, you'll see at the bottom section where it says non-certified, those are the 167 positions. So those are non-certified, so they consist of executive assistants, in-school suspension supervisors, our registrar of students at the high school, secretaries or clerks for all 16 schools and central office. And then we have paraprofessionals and teaching assistants that cover all 16 schools. So that's the 167. So in the difference, what you'll see, these individuals could be office paraprofessionals that are helping in the office when you walk in. They could be instructional paraprofessionals. They could be library paraprofessionals. And so they cover all 16 schools. When you look at Melissa's group of non-certified staff, those are student aides that are working directly with students. And she'll take you through that, but they are a little bit
It's
different.
just a large number and trying to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
A page will show you.
Couple clarifications. One, the Bristow doesn't or has a part-time assistant principal?
Correct. We have a full-time employee who we assign a portion of her. We assign her, her pay and her budget in the budget book based on a part-time assignment for being the assistant principal at Bristow, and then there's a portion that is currently allocated to supervision of the REACH program. Historically, in the past, if you go back a couple of years, before we had elementary assistant principals, we had the assistant principal at Bristow would supervise Bristow for 60 or 70% of the time, and then there was an expectation the other 30% of the time they would float over to the elementary to provide relief for evaluation caseload at some of our larger elementary schools. We shifted that model with the provision of having an 092 certified elementary assistant principal at our elementary schools, and shifted the responsibilities to reach. And again, we're looking to tweak that again.
Okay. So when the Bristow principal needs to go to central office, is there someone with an 092 in charge at the school?
Yes.
So, yeah, typically it would be that assistant principal, but we also have our department supervisors who have 092s, and at times there are teacher leaders that are in programs that might be tapped on the shoulder to carry the walkie-talkie for the day, to give them some experience, especially if a couple of the administrators need to go.
Okay. And the teachers that are based at the Board of Ed, they also go into schools, they do professional development, they help crunch data, look at test scores. So they're doing a lot, but do they model lessons ever?
They can, yes,
Okay.
they can. Some of them go to the PLCs, sit in on the PLCs and help teachers at that level. They can model lessons, coach lessons, meet with teachers on curriculum. There's a wide variety of things they do, directly supporting teachers and then supporting them at the next level here with
Right.
And
planning
definitely some of our
professional-
lead trainers on CSIs, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they develop CSI and training, and they often not only develop it but deliver it, or teach or work with a smaller group of people who can turnkey it and deliver it. So
And if I understand too, they often work on a state level too, like with the Native American curriculum and different programs, and with
They
the
do.
Asian studies and things that are coming up, there's roles to build state curriculum.
they stay very well in tune with state trends and communication with different offices there. If there's something that is coming out that needs to be adjusted, for instance, the science of reading, for instance, major change to our reading program in the elementaries. So our curriculum specialist for ELA and social studies has been very closely aligned with any state efforts and regional efforts to ensure that the science of reading programming and the district leadership literacy teams and the school-based leadership literacy teams are functioning as the state had intended.
Okay. One last thing. At next meeting for the budget, we made a big change from curriculum specialists to assistant principals. I'd love to hear the results of that this year, any changes going forward, and what has been the benefit? Because that was a big change, and I can see from the budget of 2023-24, it was a cost change, but I'd love to hear if the change was worth and the benefit.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to speak on that. I can give you information next time. I can just talk about the. We're excited by the change. I mean, it was not perfectly cost neutral, but actually, was there a cost savings associated with that, Liz? Do you recall?
There was a cost savings. I don't recall offhand what
It
it
was.
was. I'm
Yeah, it
sorry.
wasn't dramatic. It was like 23,000 something in that neighborhood, maybe. I don't know. We could look up
I
what
have
the.
it from last year's files.
Yeah,
I
we can look up
that
what the cost savings was, but one of the real benefits of that, aside from the opportunity to divide evaluation caseloads, an immediate piece for our elementary principals to kind of reduce that evaluation caseload down to something more manageable. We really looked at all of the different responsibilities inherent to an elementary principal and wanted to position them more, I guess, in the curricular role as the leader of instructional practice. So whereas our curriculum specialist did an outstanding job with that for years and years, kind of as a coach mentor, being able to have the principal in that role, especially to not only coach mentor, but as the primary evaluator for a lot of the classroom teachers. In order to do so, our principals would often get tied up at the elementary level in a lot of management-related tasks, student discipline, and certainly attendance at PPTs as the 092. So that is essentially the bulk of the responsibility that we put on to the assistant principal on the day-to-day operations, although obviously our elementaries work, leadership work as a team. They divide and conquer, and there's some overlap in sharing, but that's kind of the big picture. It's also helped to therefore do some recalibration with our department supervisors on pupil services and have them have some greater focus, whether that be in their program responsibilities or looking at some of the secondary high school, middle school responsibilities. So that's been our approach. I'm certain we can prepare some more information. Overall, I would say the change has yielded some really good results, but like anything, it's brand new this year. Everyone's kind of learning it, test driving it. We've certainly hit some speed bumps along the way that we work on, but I couldn't be more impressed with the team that we have, and I do hope that we'll be able to talk about tangible results as it impacts student learning.
Latoya.
My question was just about the ISS supervisors. Is that for, because I know it says we have 4 last year, was that from, we brought in 2 additional staff in there that were getting trained in some stuff to support in those roles, or is that just like a more supervisors, or is it staff?
So you're looking at the.
ISS supervisors?
So previously, we had one at each high school,
Okay.
and then we have one now at 2 of the middle schools as well.
Okay, and then the staff who work there, what's their titles?
So,
The ISS, they're paraprofessionals.
Okay. All right,
that was an
thank you.
addition, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, didn't mean to step over it.
And I'm just curious, to go back to Ethan's question about the density of some of the non-certified staff. There's a number that you typically use. I know it's based on number of students in a school in terms of how many TAs they might get. I wanted to share with Ethan that our TAs that are not necessarily within Melissa's program. These are some of the go-to people that we utilize when there are substitute positions requiring a substitute that go unfilled. And I would say that that's a significant way in which those folks are utilized on a daily basis.
Yeah, and so what we do is each building, depending on size, we have a number or calculation that we do, and each building's allocated a certain number of teaching, I gotta get it right now, student aides, right,
No,
Liz?
teaching assistants.
Is it still teaching assistants?
is.
That we look at and allocate to the building, and essentially they act as, for when there's shortages, teachers are out, subs aren't there, they're able to go and provide that stability. And so that's something that each building is given, and that number is monitored very carefully so that they have those in the building. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Yes, Shannon.
Just curious, if you think about kind of a breakdown percentage-wise of expenditures on central office compared to school level. I know there's a resource online where I looked up last year. It was for the 22-23 year. West Hartford, I don't know how accurate this is, but it said about 1.4% of the funds were spent on central office as compared with the state average of 3.4%, which sounds pretty efficient. And just curious if that's accurate, if you guys think of it that way.
I believe those figures are accurate. Generally, those come from the reporting that we do at year end through the EFS system, the Educational Financial System. And so what we're required to do by state law is to take all of our expenditures from the general fund, grant funds, et cetera. We classify each and every expense by type of expense, by funding source, by purpose, whether it's special education, regular education, or support services for central office, whether it's a salary, a benefit, and they have all these codes. And so we go through, we code each and every expenditure to this, and then we submit it, and they come up with the reports that you're looking at online. And so we do that every year. Paul certifies that, and it's something that's due to the state by the 1st of September every year. We do that over the summer based on our actual expenditures. So while I'm not sure what our percentage was for last year, I assume that the data you saw is accurate based on the filings that we do. Certainly, our EFS reports from last year, is that what you're looking for? Sure.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, please continue. Thank you.
All right, we'll be moving on to pupil services, special education. That starts on page 6 of your summary and references pages E5 and E6 for this first page. But in case you didn't see it, I also want to start by referencing the supplemental pages starting on 8 through 12 in the back of your board book, because they do highlight a large overview of the pupil services department and important trends that we've seen and we've talked about at the board table before, but I think it's important to highlight them as we talk about pupil services and what that's looked like over the past 10 years. And so thank you to Liz for putting together these beautiful graphs that really help illustrate, the changes we've seen over time. So from the 2015-2016 school year to the present school year, the prevalence rate of special education here in West Hartford has increased pretty significantly. We are not different from the state. We're closing in at about 20%, and that is similar to where the state's prevalence rate is as well. So we really see that. In terms of the students that we support in pupil services, this current school year, these are October 1 numbers. We have a little close to 1,600 students that are served in district, but important to note that we have over 100 students, almost 120 students served in our magnets and private schools. And while we support our students in our private schools for child find and under IDA, they actually receive a proportionate share of our funding to go towards their special education services. They may or may not be West Hartford residents. So you'll see in some of the supplementals that that's kind of disaggregated out who's a resident and who isn't a resident, so you understand that. But regardless of their town of residence, if they attend a private school located in the town of West Hartford Public Schools serves our special education needs. So just important for you to note that. And our out-of-district numbers, October 1 was 125. Important to note that we have some unique characteristics here in our district. We have one of the largest public transition programs in the state of Connecticut that proudly serves our post-secondary students 18 to 22. And there was a recent change where students were exiting at 21 and then later at 22 on their 22nd birthday. And last year that had changed. It was an unfunded mandate. They were staying the whole year, which we were very happy to have them. But just important to note, there are some legislative pieces that have come and changed our world. We also have the largest deaf and hard of hearing population in a public school in the state of Connecticut, and we're proudly serving those students with our teachers of the deaf and sign language interpreters. We've had some great events. Our special education teachers and related service providers really create magic in our spaces. We've heard some highlights here at the board with our unified theater performances, unified sports celebrations. We've had some great deaf and hard of hearing community events that are happening. So just a very wonderful community for our special education students here in the town of West Hartford. Of course, we've also talked about some important facts that have been late in breaking around a legislative movement to fund some of the excess cost components. We were really happy to see that Governor Lamont did put through the $40 million for this current year towards our excess cost reimbursement. And we hope to be recipients of a pretty significant portion of that, which will really help us this current year. There is legislative movement on a new bill for $40 million, but that will not be till the 26-27 school year for $40 million, and it looks like a potential grant opportunity for that same year in the amount of $14 million, which will be a competitive grant. It's important to note that, and the reason I bring that up is because we still are active in our community, voicing our concerns around excess cost grant funding, because next year, at this point, there is no, and there's nothing through the legislator at this point for support for the 25-26 school year relative to the excess cost reimbursement. And we could talk more about that, but we'll talk more about what the staffing looks like on this page. Kelly and I had a great opportunity in January to provide information along the continuum, talk about our services and our programming. So what you're going to see here is our continuum of services from resource, early learning center, intensive academic, and intensive behavior support programs. In the adopted budget to the current year, there was a variance of 1.0 from our intensive academic program to our intensive resource program. Again, this is driven by student need, and so we had originally allocated to our intensive academic program, but as we kind of surveyed as the students came in, it was shifted to our resource program to really support our students. In this current budget, we're looking to add an additional 3 intensive academic teachers, 2 at the elementary level and 1 at our post-secondary program. The elementary numbers are primarily due to the Burr Baby kindergarten start age change. So those students would have started some of those students would have started this year. It's a larger cohort moving into kindergarten next year, substantiating the 2 positions. And then our post-secondary teacher position would be in response to students requiring transition-only services. Also, in response to student need, we're looking to add a board-certified behavior analyst to support our behavior programming and behaviors district-wide. And those are offset, again, by enrollment and student needs of 2 resource teachers at the elementary level and an addition of 0.5 at the middle school level. So overall, it's a net 2.5 increase for special education teachers.
And as we look at the funding for this program, you'll see as we compare the adopted budget to the proposed for the current year, that our salaries have a variance of 6.1%. That is our collective bargaining agreements and the market rate settlement that we had, as well as a net increase of the 2.5 positions that Melissa detailed for you. Offsetting this increase is a reduction of approximately $46,000 in the appropriation for tutors in the homebound instruction program, and I believe that's due to a change and some success in the way that that program is run, and maybe Melissa could speak more to that. But then the other significant change here, and really an item that's very significant to our budget, is the increase in our out-of-district tuition, which is almost $3.7 million.
Questions? Ethan?
So that assumes there won't be funding for it.
That is correct. We have not seen anything yet that adds any additional funding to the state budget for the 25-26 school year, above and beyond the flat funding we currently have. So based upon our anticipated number of students and anticipation of increased tuition rates and a reimbursement rate of excess costs, probably in the 55 to 58%, we are seeing a significant increase in that line item.
Claire?
And I believe we are going from like a 19% or 17% special ed population, almost a whole percentage point up this year.
Yeah, we've really continued to see a sharp increase in our prevalence rate. You know, it's a number of factors. I think it's better identification. I do believe that we are a destination district. We have families moving in all the time, seeking our special education services. So we do see that we've had a pretty significant increase.
As far as the intensive academic program, how are you finding space within the school? Because these are classrooms or mini classrooms. They are not in the general classroom. So is there a space constraint and a space problem?
I can tell you, because we're finding it, Melissa and I, because we went out to schools and walked the hallways and kind of did an assessment of how our space is being utilized. So, you know, the potential of seeing some reductions in classroom spaces, and if we can project and see that there'll be consistent space available, that's kind of the determining factor for us to be able to say, hey, can we utilize a classroom space here? Now, obviously, any space in any building, no spaces are ever left vacant. So it's a question often of, as you're going, if there's a larger classroom space that's being utilized for a smaller number of students, it's sort of a question of, all right, is there an alternate space that we can take that programming in order to have a larger space that we might need for a classroom, in the same way that principals do when the number of second grade classrooms, you know, goes up by 1, they find a way to utilize what they have.
And how many, I know there's been some locker room renovation into classrooms. Is that something that's happened at other schools? Duffy has had,
That happened in the past, about, I think the last one we did for that was 6 or 7 years ago, and
And-
we have no plans to do it again.
and you don't have any other unused locker rooms?
We don't.
When we used to change, the kids would change
No,
clothes
we
for
don't.
gym?
Not that are applicable to convert to any spaces like that.
Okay, thank you.
Ethan?
Page 9 in the data supplement, I think it is. I'm reading right? Yeah. I thought it was saying that you went from about 2% up on student special education prevalence. Is that, am I reading, was that something that means something else?
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Ethan? I
So-
couldn't hear you.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I don't control it. The special education student prevalence, if I'm saying that right, that applies special needs, right?
Correct.
So that shows 2% for the last fiscal year.
Correct, but it's an overall 20% here in the district. So the percentage of prevalence of disabilities with the overall population of students enrolled in West Hartford is 20%. Does that make sense?
20% of the student population.
Correct.
Yeah, Ethan, you may be doing like 1794 compared to 1756,
Yeah.
a true count to true count. When we're talking about, I think when what Claire's talking about, if we take the 1756 for 23-24 and divide that by the total student population, and that's our prevalence percentage for that year. So when we take the 1794 for this year, we'd be dividing by, was it 9316, or the total student population for this year, which would be a different denominator. So we're not necessarily doing a count of special ed this year against last year. We're doing the percentage of the true population last year to the percentage of the true population this
No,
year.
no, I understand. But I was looking to see how much has the special needs students, the number quantitatively changed. And so it looks like it's been pretty, with the exception of 23 to 24, when it went up 10%, it's been pretty steady, relatively speaking.
Yeah, we've shown steady growth. I guess I'm just trying to say that when we talk about the percentage of special ed, we're not comparing it to the number of special ed students we had last year. We're comparing it to the number of overall students we had.
Okay, well, I'm looking for budget, how much it decreased.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
I had a question on this same graph on page 9. What does DCF mean on that graph? Those are students that are
Placed by DCF, yep.
Placed.
Placed in an outside approved special education school by DCF,
So DCF is the guardian, or DCF made the decision?
both.
But their nexus for funding is West Hartford for enrollment.
Uh-huh. Got it, okay. I also wanted to ask you, considering that we keep hearing over and over again how West Hartford is a destination for particularly people with children with special needs, what is your sense that we're actually estimating this and appropriately, meaning that we're not going to have more need than we're actually budgeting for? Because we keep hearing that everybody's moving here for the special needs programs.
You know, all we can rely on is historical information based on, projections, what we know in the current moment. It does happen that we do have to reexamine, just like there's section breaks at times at the start of a school year. There are times, and you'll see in the next page when we talk about related services, even this year, there were additions beyond the adopted budget in response to student need. Yeah, and so we see that over time. I mean, pupil services is driven by student need. And so as students enroll or PPTs meet and discuss an evolving student need, services change. So a meeting might be held and a student needs an increase in speech and language services. And if there's a large N of that happening across the district, then it might warrant us having a conversation about service delivery or do we need to add additional staffing during the school year. It's an unknown. Projections are our best estimate. We try to be as accurate as possible. I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say we had 73 move-ins between July 1 and October 15th of this current school year, and that's with IEPs. So that's a large number of students that, we, projected some, but not at that many. And so that really does have an impact, depending, especially if they're landing in cohorts, or if they require more specialized programming. If some of them go straight to out of districts because they were already placed in out of districts. So, those are things that, we just try to program for students as they come in, but projections can be hard to manage as like a firm projection. Mm-hmm.
Just need your mic.
What was adopted and what was,
Mm-hmm.
what is current is not really necessarily the same.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, no, for certain, you're bringing up something which is a very valid point, that the special ed, staffing and can be reactive, as opposed to, we can get generally, pretty good census data, pretty good idea. We certainly know. I think we used to talk years ago about the cohort survival ratio, which is, hey, the percentage of kids who are in a particular grade or in third grade that are going to remain in fourth grade, and so on. And we know where we might see some fall off from that, typically in the transitions from elementary to middle to high. Special ed is a little bit more of a kind of reacting to what happens on the ground. We make our best estimates. But in terms of the destination district, number one, it's certainly true for our special ed, but I would say it's certainly true in general for the education program as a whole. I'm looking at all the emails we've gotten, even just this week. Pretty much it's every parent, if they moved into West Hartford, they're talking about they moved into West Hartford because of the school. So it's a valid point.
Claire.
Yeah, I know that there was the 40 million that was on the fence and then it passed. There was also a 13 or 14 million that was going to be put towards studying the outplacement, transportation, all these costs involved in that. Did that pass? And if it did, is there anything we can do as a district to, apply or do a program or something that would help to study this increase of outplacement, the price increase, the transportation, all those things? Because I think there's some expertise in this district that would benefit doing some investigation in that area.
Yeah, so there is a bill on the table for a proposal for the grant-funded opportunities that will go live in the 26-27 school year. So it's a future opportunity. Certainly when that goes live, we will take advantage of that for sure. It just has to be offered and go open so that we can. It does look like I think there's been a lot of parents, stakeholders, community members, educators, and professionals coming forward to speak on behalf of funding of special education in the state of Connecticut. And so there are a number of initiatives on the legislative table, and I think the delegation is really advocating on behalf of our students and our families and our districts. And so I'm happy to see that the initial bill passed, and I'm hoping that, there will be continued advocacy around some of these bills that are on up for consideration for us to be able to really support them being moved forward, and having the delegation and legislation really understand the impact that this has on our communities and our schools and our students. So I'm hopeful.
Other questions? Please continue.
All right, we'll be turning to page 7 in our summary book, which references pages E21 and E22. And this is related services. So this covers our social workers, psychologists, speech and language pathologists, our physical therapists, occupational therapists, teachers of deaf, our interpreters, and our nursing department as well. So in response to student need, and this is what we were talking about, and Gail was referencing earlier, is that post the adopted budget, we did have an increase in staffing of a total of 1.4 positions over budget, which was a 1.0 school psychologist, an increase of a 1.0 speech and language pathologist, a .2 of a sign language interpreter, and a .2 of a nurse. And that was overall offset. The psychologist was a trade between a social work and a psychologist position to really support evaluation and testing. 2 additional positions are added in the current staffing for the 25-26 budget. A psychologist is added at the secondary level to address caseloads and increased need for testing and evaluation. And speech and language pathologist is added at the elementary level to address needs related to testing, evaluations related to dyslexia, and also to support the needs of our intensive academic programming increase that we anticipate.
And the corresponding budget for this section has a salary increase of approximately 6.6%. The employees in this division are in the WHEA and the nursing union, and we have their contractual collective bargaining increase, as well as the addition of the 3.4 positions that we have discussed. The operating lines and the equipment lines are an offset, so we are have a consistent budget overall as it relates to those areas.
Questions? All right, please continue.
All right, turning to page 8 of your summary book, this is Pupil Services Supervision and corresponds with pages E33 and E34 in the binder. So you'll see that we have 7 department supervisors that are budgeted for the 25-26 school year. And the current school year, there was an unbudgeted .45 department supervisor that was added in response to cover supervision for Section 504 plans for students. And this part-time position will be absorbed in existing leadership positions and eliminated for the 25-26 school year, not impacting any students or supervision, just efficiencies that we've found. And then there's a pupil services office paraprofessional that was upgraded to a clerk position in this proposed budget. And you'll see this is where we really have our non-certified staff. You see an overall reduction of 7. Really, that's not impact any student services. These are student aides directly supporting students. And what we've been looking at is certification levels that are required. So within our current budget, so less positions but same allocation of funding is making sure that the certification levels meet our student needs. So in some cases, it's registered behavior technicians that are really there to support very technical aspects of student programs and our more intensivized programs, or paraprofessionals in lieu of student aides so that the students have a higher, the paraprofessionals who have higher training are paired with those students who require that.
And as we look at the funding for this program, you will see that we have a salary increase for this program of 8.9%. That's a bit higher than some of our other programs, but it follows what Melissa had discussed, that we're really trying to make sure that we have the appropriate specialized student support. And so in your book, you will see that there is an increase in our paraprofessional line and a corresponding decrease in our student aid as we bring on specialized pupil support specialists. As we look at our operating budget, you'll see there's an increase of $50,000, which is directly related to the purchase of materials relating to our dyslexia programming.
Claire.
These 7 positions, are there opportunities or training so that they can apply for a different sort of position or a position within the district, or are these people going to be losing their jobs?
I could answer that. So they're actually, they were unfilled positions that we were looking at, that they were vacant, and they were student aid positions that were converted to paraeducator positions, which were positions we were able to fill. And also in the paraeducator union, there's different levels of paraeducators. So applied behavior analysis paraeducators, and paraeducators that have specialized training, so that allows for us to hire more qualified staff versus having the vacant positions for student aides. So no one lost their job. It wasn't a displacement of any staff, but great question.
Gail.
I was just wondering if you could explain what department supervisors are and what they do.
Absolutely. So our 7 department supervisors are special education administrators that oversee the special education teams and students at their building sites and monitor all of the federal and state legal timelines relative to special education.
So there's only 7 of them, so what schools?
Correct. So they're mostly at the secondary level and cover our early learning center and our out-of-district programs. And then we have one of them covers our Strive post-secondary and our private school programs. Our supervision at the elementary level for special education has shifted to our elementary assistant principals.
Other questions? Please continue.
As you turn to page 9 of our summary document, you can see we have reached the general support services budget, which corresponds to pages F2 to F5 in your budget book. These are primarily our central office positions, or in the case of plant and facilities, employees who work in all of our school buildings. As we look at the staffing for the upcoming year, you will see that we have an additional 0.15 position in the superintendent's office that is consistent with the current year. And what that really is a portion of a secretarial position that supports our high school summer school program. As we look at our security officers, you will see in the current year we are 1 officer over budget. In response to the construction project at Duffy, we hired another officer to ensure safety at that site. That project will be wrapped up before the start of the upcoming school year, and so that position will be eliminated, and we will go back down to 26 employees in the residency and security office. And other than that, there are no other changes to our staffing. As we look at the budget that corresponds to general support services, you will see that for salaries, we have an increase of $600,000 or 3.4% for the individuals in this area. As we look at our benefits, Gil, you had a question about benefits earlier, and this is where all of our benefits are listed. The largest benefit is our health and medical insurance. The budget for the upcoming year increases significantly. Certainly, it is the majority of that $3.3 million increase. At this point, we've received an estimated premium increase, or at the time that the budget was prepared, we assumed an estimated premium increase of 10%. We received the letter a day or two ago, and it is 9.9. So we, have a minor savings there, but we had been optimistic that that would come in a little bit lower. We've belonged to the state partnership plan now since I believe the 2019 to 2020 school year. And it's really been a good program for us. I think overall the average increase has been around maybe 4.5% to 4.6%, but there are certain years that it's higher. You may recall last year it dropped down to, I think, 2% was our increase, but this is a year that it is higher. You'll also see our appropriation for unemployment insurance is being increased $25,000. That is to reflect current salaries and anticipated claims, and our Social Security is increased consistent with our wages and our actual experience. As we move on to our operating expenses, the largest increase in this area is our transportation costs. We have ongoing contracts for both in-district and out-of-district transportation. So this increase includes our contractual rate increases for those contracts. In addition, we are seeing an increased demand for out-of-district special education buses, and that's really what's driving this increase. And I know we've talked about that particularly as it relates even to the current year budget, and we are anticipating that will continue to be a budget driver. We had good news on our utilities front. Our appropriation for 25-26 reflects a net reduction of approximately $100,000. Our appropriations for both heating and water are reduced based upon conservation efforts, lower usage, and we've been able to amortize an accumulated surplus in that fund. Our electricity budget is increasing a bit due to rate changes, but as I said, overall, a reduction of 100,000. Our tuition reimbursement account for our teachers per our WHEA contract is increasing $10,000 for the upcoming year. And we have an increase in our contracted services, which reflects rate increases for existing services. And we're also seeing an increase in our custodial supplies line based upon our experience in inflation in that area. We have just a couple of lines of equipment, and we're seeing a reduction for the upcoming year. In the current year, we had to do a planned replacement of a facilities maintenance vehicle that's non-recurring for next year, and so we're seeing the reduction resulting from that line item. Our general support services is a large area dollar-wise and has, more of our benefit, operating costs and variances. So if you do have questions, I went through that rather quickly, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions that you may have on that.
Ethan.
So on page C1, when I looked at the medical, it went from 24 million in fiscal year 23 to 26 million, 24, budgeted for 28 in 25, and then 26, it went to 30. So it's 2 million consistently, or 10% roughly, for the last 4 years.
It has. Now, that's the combined funds, but yes, it has consistently gone up. It's the, so is your question why is?
Well, it's why I realize you have no control over it, but it's a pretty significant number.
It is a significant number. We are covering, I believe in the plan, there's probably 1,500 employees and their families, and so it's a significant cost. So when we look at any kind of an increase on such a large base cost, it is a large variance. It's not just the active health insurance that's in there, that also covers our retiree health care and our contribution to our obligation and liability for other post-employment benefits, so that's all worked into that same number.
Are the numbers all West Hartford retired and active, or is it the entire state that they take from the pool?
So we're only paying, obviously, for our folks, but the state partnership plan publishes regional or county rates that are consistent for any participant who is in that county.
Okay, what I meant was, when they pulled the number, is it based upon the pool of West Hartford or the pool of the state?
I believe it's the pool of the state because we're all participating in the same
It's gone
program.
up that much?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, actually, certain areas, different regions may go up more, may go up less, depending upon, they zone it off by county.
Oh, okay.
And
So-
so Fairfield County, for example, I believe had an increase this year of a little over 11%, whereas we were at 9.9.
But ours is based on Hartford County. I
Correct.
assume.
Hartford County.
So we're part of the whole county.
Yes, we're part of the state, but they set regional rates
No,
based on.
that's what I was trying to figure out.
Yep.
Just one additional question. The residency and security, I assume, is primarily the SROs?
It's mostly our security officers, correct. We currently have 23 security officers, and then we have a director, an assistant director, a residency coordinator, and then someone who works in the office. So that office is also handling all of our registrations as well as building security.
Then I can ask one last question. The other one that surprised me was the electricity went up 300,000 for the last fiscal year. Is that based on projection again from the town or from somebody else?
So we have an energy specialist who works for both the town and the board. And so it's a function of her projections for usage as well as upcoming rates.
And she's projecting, I assume, that energy rates will go up?
That they will go up a little bit, but we just haven't seen the same type of drop in electricity usage that we have seen in some of our other utilities. But in whole, for the program, it is still a reduction overall. And so, it's about 100,000 reduction year over year.
Under electricity, under heating it was, but under electricity,
So I'm looking at the combined. So if you look at our three utilities, heating, water, electricity,
Okay.
and add them up, it's a $100,000 reduction.
All right, well, it looks like they overestimated the heating last year, because that was projected to go up about 400,000, and looks like from your budget, it stayed same.
We did. We had a light winter, and so we're now seeing the benefit of that.
Thanks.
I had a question on the health insurance, being that, like as Ethan was saying, it seems to be going up, and then this year it really went up. And when I look at all the things that are driving the budget, a lot of them we don't have any control over, but that we do have control. And I'm curious if, is there any other option for the health insurance, or are we kind of in this state employee health insurance and that's it? Or do we have other options?
I think we certainly, there's always other options. However, prior to joining the state partnership plan, we were self-insured. And we found that really added a lot of volatility to our budget. We experienced catastrophic claims, so that our contribution each year was varying widely and was quite unpredictable. And so at the time when we switched to this plan in the 2019-2020 school year, an analysis had been done as to the cost effectiveness of doing so. I think at that point it was determined that it really was a cost-effective solution. At the time, I believe what the projection was, we saved $2 million?
Yeah, at
Just
least.
to start off.
Just to start off the first year.
And then the first few years of the program, we really had very reasonable increases. The pandemic has thrown things off a little bit as we come back to a new normal, and so that has certainly affected us. But as I said, last year was 2%, so we certainly were very happy with that percentage increase. I think that this just happens to be a year where the claims statewide require a higher contribution. Of course, any type of change to our plans or our health insurance would need to be negotiated with all of our unions as well.
Oh, really? Okay. So is the only two choices then, we either self-insure or we do the state plan, and those are the options?
I think those are probably the two best options, yes. And we really found that the volatility involved with self-insuring and hiring a third-party administrator and trying to do all of that ourselves was just not an effective means of doing so.
So we cannot change the health insurance without the consent of the unions?
I believe we would have to negotiate with them,
We'd have to open up all the contracts for that.
and which is what we had to do when we switched to the state partnership plan.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So, like Ethan, I was surprised at the 39% reduction in the heating and the 21% increase in electricity. Can you speak a little to some of the changes that have happened in our elementary schools? I know we had air conditioning in both high schools. Do you foresee some of the window work in some schools like Duffy to reduce some of the heating costs, but then the electricity go up because, are they getting air conditioning, or is it?
Yeah.
What? Anyway, speak to some of the.
We
we've
should
done
see,
some
as
investment.
we're bringing the new systems online at Duffy and then at Webb Hill and at the other schools years and years from now, you will see an increase in the efficiency of the HVAC systems that are being put in place. There's certainly a higher efficiency. There's certainly operating with less of a draw from an energy standpoint. We anticipate that it's not going to be a significant piece that you're going to see from a year to year in the budget, but we expect over time we're moving to these high efficiency systems like we did when we opened Charter Oak. When we opened Charter Oak, we moved from a very older boiler system to actually the underground heat vacs, the HVACs, the individual heating systems that are in that building as well, that run the geothermal. So.
Other questions?
Liz, could I just clarify one thing on the health insurance, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but it looks to me like in 22, you were at like 24 million, and then you were at 26 million, which doesn't seem like 2%. Like each year, it looks like it goes up 2 million.
What page are you looking at?
I'm looking at C1. Unless I could be misreading it, but am I right? Like, it looks like, to me, it's going up about 10% just about every year, but.
So there are a couple of factors that come in. Oops, thank you. First of all, it's the number of employees who are employed by the district and elect to participate in the program. We also have to look at what level they participate in. You can participate at 3 levels, either just yourself, you and one other person, or your whole family. And the premiums are significantly different at each level. The other thing that needs to be taken into account are our retirees and the number of them that elect to keep the district insurance. Certainly our non-certified personnel, when they retire, can elect to keep it, and even our teachers can elect to either take the state insurance or ours. So there's a cost associated with that as well. In addition, we have to make a contribution for other post-employment benefits, which is basically health care for employees in retirement. And so every year an actuary does a valuation for us and determines what that contribution is, and that goes up every year as well. So there are kind of a lot of factors. It's not just a premium increase. Like, I could give you a history, and I have one actually not on me, but of what the premiums are each year so that you can see what the average increase is. But that's just one factor in the whole program.
Other questions? Ethan?
This is just a follow-up, but it's a question, not a statement. Do you know if the state or the county uses like a stopgap insurance for high cases, or I'm used to seeing that?
I assume that they do have stopgaps. Certainly when we were self-insured, we had stopgap
We had
insurance.
multiple levels of stopgap.
And yeah, we had multiple levels, because you do have catastrophic claims that can just have
Right.
too large an impact for the plan to absorb. Now, given the size of the state plan and the number of enrollees, they may not find that as necessary. But they do a report on the state partnership plan. I can look to see if it discusses or
Yeah, I was just,
talks about
'cause
stopgap
it would
insurance.
help with volatility if that's what I was wondering.
Yes.
That's what we used to use it for. We would have levels of stopgap that we would put in place when we were self-insuring.
Right, because just the increases just seem
Correct.
significant.
Other questions? And Claire, out of respect for you, I know you had a question earlier and we paused, but if you want to revisit your question.
Yeah, we've about elementary class size. So we've received a lot of emails about elementary class size. And there's two issues. One is a lot of the emails talk about fairness. And why would one school have more kids and another school have less kids? I know that our 2 magnet schools, by their design, have a lower cap of class size. But if you could speak to the issue about why schools can't all have the same number of kids in every class, because a lot of people in their I think that needs to be explained, because from a parent's point of view, they see, oh, this school has this many, this school has that. That's not fair. Why would the teachers in that school have more kids in their class than the teacher in this school? So I think it's important to understand how those numbers happen, and many of us understand that because we're in the business, but if you're not in the business and don't understand all that, it doesn't seem fair. And the second thing is we have set class size limits. And as a teacher in West Hartford, I've been at that max limit. And if we did make a change in class size and drop, say, the 4 or 5 limit 2 sizes down, or 2 students down, and the K through 3rd grade 2 students down. So you'd have a cap of K to 3 of 21 and a cap of 4 to 5 of 25 students. Looking at the chart, and I did a lot of calculating, but that would equate to 15 teacher positions that would have to be added to this year's budget to say that you can't go over 25 and you can't go over 21. Would we have the space for that? And what approximately would be the cost?
Yeah, I can jump in on your questions and certainly invite the team to add anything. So just in terms of your first question about, I guess I'll call it equity of class size across different schools and across different grade levels. So obviously, you all know we operate within board-established class size guidelines, and we use 23 as the figure for, excluding our magnets for our K to 3. And I'm looking at our projection sheet, and I see, it's all based on the size of the cohort that happens to register, and let's just say, in that kindergarten year, within that elementary school zone. So I'm looking at 2 different cohorts that are current grade Ks that would roll into grade 1 next year, and in one school there were 38 children who enrolled, and in the other school there were 47. So with the 38 children, that was a nice even split of 2 sections of 19, and whereas in the other school with 47, or even if it had been 48, 2 sections would be 24. 24 students would be in excess of our class size guidelines, so it was a break of 3 sections. And those 3 sections, therefore break out into 16 each, or, really because it's 47, 16, 16, 15. So that school gives the appearance, wow, they have nice smaller class sizes. They're smaller by 4 or even 3 or 4 students. And then clearly those differences, when you roll up into 4th and 5th grade, where the class size guidelines go up to 27, those differences become more pronounced. And it's similar, very much at the high school level. The number of sections is based on the total number of students who happen to enroll in a given year. So the class sizes can be very different from year to year and from course to course, simply based on the number of students who kind of show up at the door. We heard a lot about this last year. It's very true that there are some neighborhoods where, the cohort sizes seem to consistently just be larger. And that, I don't have a solution for that outside of kind of what Dr. Morrow said in terms of the only real way to have greater equity across those, might involve a redistricting, which would be a very much a larger conversation.
Could you explain redistricting?
Sure. Like when we look at our maps of where you happen to particularly live in relation to the closest elementary school, all of the addresses are zoned for a specific elementary school, and so based on the address of the house in which you reside, will typically determine the elementary school which you attend, unless of course you're programming into one of our magnet schools, or in very unique situations, we had situations this year where we did not want to exceed a certain class size. We had pretty much reached what we deemed to be capacity, and we offered, in those very specialized circumstances, we offered attendance at either a magnet school or a nearby neighborhood school. But it's it's a responsibility that we have to ensure that we can bus efficiently, that we can have equitable procedures for enrollment, that like any school district, we establish zones of residency within the town to map themselves to our elementaries, to our middles, and to our high schools. It's dramatically unlikely that, children are simply not going to be born at uniform rates, distributed geographically evenly across. So there'll always be some variance there. In terms of the different class size guidelines, it's certainly a prerogative of the board to look at class size guidelines. It comes at a financial cost. To reduce, you said you did the math, and I looked at your math, and I would agree with you that if we wanted to reduce K to 3 down to K to 3 down from a class size guideline of 23 down to 21, and if we wanted to reduce 4 and 5 from a class size of a guideline maximum of 27 down to a maximum of 25, based on these projections, we might anticipate 15 additional teaching sections. And as we said earlier, we look at an average kind of salary for a teacher in and around $75,000 and a $25,000 benefit package. So it's $100,000 per section times 15 sections would be $1.5 million. So it is no small undertaking. And so you weigh the financial cost against the potential benefits for students, because I do recognize that at the end of the day, we're in the business of educating children, and we certainly want to be able to provide the best that we're capable to provide within the constraints that we have. And I know we had a lot of conversation about this last year. I just want to go back to point out that because I don't know that it was necessarily obvious, so I'm glad to have the opportunity to point it out, that we do anticipate, what's on the page here would be an absolute strict, application of our class size guidelines, netting a total of 193 sections. We are budgeting for 196. We are budgeting to say that we expect that we may have move-ins, or we may have reason to take 3 sections on this page, and three spaces on this page in a particular grade level, and create an additional section break to provide an additional classroom, which would obviously average down what the average class size was for that grade level for that year. And we have seen historically, we see in the current budget where maybe that number of move-ins that we're projecting is larger than once we get to August. There are more children present than we had anticipated, and we still have that same need to break that section where we end up being over the adopted budget, something that I would take license to do as your superintendent, in the interest and in the benefits of acting on our mission to deliver instruction. And then we would need to find a means to pay for that between essentially September 1 and June, what have you, so that the budget does not become over budget. And that is where the magic of efficiencies is undertaken by Liz and the team. We may not do something. There may become a position open somewhere else in the district based on a late resignation that ends up being not filled in order to accommodate for that. It's obviously what we want to do is we want to have the absolute best possible projections so that we're not having to kind of play that react contact game and find funding for something that was not budgeted. Hope that helps.
Other questions? Jason.
So this might not be for tonight, but this may be, the next workshop discussion. But a lot of the concerns we get from parents is obviously kids do better in smaller class sizes. That's kind of the mantra you hear over and over again. What does the data actually tell us about that and where our class sizes are?
Sure. So we've talked about this up at the table on a number of times, and we can bring maybe some more. I'm going to talk off the top of my head right now. I don't have necessarily there's one very good study that was done that just had the unique conditions that they were able to perform, I guess, a more technical, scientific-based study as opposed to the protections that exist for children in terms of we're not going to experiment on them, we're not going to, change conditions and make them the subjects of the study. But there is one study that was undertaken, and there is some true data that within that study that reflects the benefits of smaller class sizes. And off the top of my head, and please correct me, I'm gonna say, I know a lot of those are based on class sizes that are smaller, somewhere near 15. I don't know how high up they went, but they're class sizes that generally are not something that's going to necessarily be achievable as a strict guideline that we would set out front. That's something that would create additions to our budget that we would need to build schools. It would be a significant increase in the number of sections for us to try to be averaging at 15 across the board or averaging at 14 across the board. And what they do find when you do start to break into kind of where we are, which is, I would say, something that's relatively typical in the state of Connecticut, relatively typical across the board. Those differences from 21 to 22, 24 to 25, those differences are not appreciable. And I would certainly never want to say that it is not a harder job. I think we have some of the hardest working, most dedicated teachers in the state of Connecticut, if not in the country. And I want to give them every credit for every single thing that they do every single day. So I don't want to minimize anything ever. In fact, I want to kind of tout the success that we continue to have with our guidelines. I know that I have also a historical document. We were able to run some numbers just based on kind of we've been in a period for a number of years. Obviously, with COVID, we've talked about that before. But I've got a 20-year history, and we can share this with you, potentially, add it in to the frequency of class sizes at the elementary that have, if I just use the number 25. And depending on where you go, but if I look at a range of years from like 2005 till 2013, 14, we were averaging somewhere close to 10 elementary sections at a class size of 25 throughout that period of years. During 2018-19, we had 5 elementary class sections at that size. 2018-19 happens to be one of our highest years for academic achievement, and it would be an interesting question to kind of tease out those 5 classrooms or the that looks like a 6 or an 8 classrooms at a class size of 24, just to do those comparisons. But it's not ground that we haven't walked in the past. I'm not going to pretend it's ideal, and I'm not going to pretend I'm doing, I'm recommending this stricter adherence to class size guidelines because it's neither miserly nor something I want to do. It is a genuine concern on some of the budget challenges that we're facing this year, both at the board table and at the town council. We're in the same boat relative to this 9.9% increase on our health insurance premiums. We're in roughly the same boat at this somewhere near 5% increase in our wages and salaries. And the only thing that we're adding to the pie that the town council doesn't have to contend with is this flat funding and the state shortfall that we have in our very specific special education cost sharing that we expect from the state of Connecticut. So that's a burden that the Board of Education budget will bear, but we'll bear it with, I would think, with a genuine understanding of our responsibility and a commitment to our mission and what we want to do to support all learners that are here, and the promise of a high quality program, that we set forward. So it's a great point, and it is a great point of debate, and I recognize and value the very passionate feelings of our constituents who really would seek lower class size guidelines and lower classes in general. And I know that you, as good-hearted people on the board, are gonna have to weigh that very carefully. And it's it's just a difficult climate, given what we heard from our town manager in terms of his recommendations for the budget, the impact that will have on the community as a whole. So I'm concerned with being able to channel the support of our parent community for our budget as it exists. In addition to adding to it, but I don't think that the argument is necessarily. I just think that everyone empathizes with our plight, and I just think it's going to be tough to get this over the line. Is my assessment.
And what I think I heard you sneak in there was that the historical data show that when we were at periods where we've had higher, closer to our guidelines, there has been no academic repercussions from that.
I think in the aggregate, we have a long history of doing well, and within that history, we have high class sizes.
And then just one other follow-up. When we do have classes that reach, sections that reach those closer to the guideline numbers, are they given additional resources? Do they have, additional teaching assistants, other types of resources we can give them?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, once we've published class lists and told families this is who your teacher is, we feel that's kind of like that's a commitment at that point. And we do have cases where all of a sudden, that week before school or 2 weeks into the school year, you get another student that gets added in, and all of a sudden you're either at that class size guideline or you're even one above it. And what we will typically do at that point in time is we will hire a teaching assistant to be able to dedicate an extra set of hands in the classroom to provide for that circulation. And we've done that even in the given year where we've had some higher, if we have, I think we had one elementary school in the current year that, we did hear quite a bit about, and I feel like, did we hire, Liz, some, an additional teaching assistant, you keep saying 167, Ethan, but I'm going to say 52 because the teaching assistants are 52 within the 167, in order to support the larger classes and if not dedicated to a class, floating between a couple of classrooms. So we do try to be responsive. I mean, I in no way, shape, or form want to dismiss the concern that parents have. I hear it, I understand it, I respect it. It's just, there's a financial component to it as well.
Other questions? Ethan?
It's a question, and I don't want to go over the numbers you have now because we're already at 7%. But I was curious, what is the assistant, how much is, it's 100,000 for an incremental teacher. How much is it for the paraprofessional or the assistant? On average.
So a paraprofessional, the salary is around 30, and they are eligible for benefits if they so elect. A teaching assistant is closer to 20 to 25.
So there's a substantial difference.
There is.
And then if I could just point one thing out, as you were talking, I was looking, you have one school with 71 kids in one grade, 47 in the next grade below it. So there's a lot of differences in the various schools.
Yeah, from year to year.
Yeah.
I also see that for elementary, we're down 20 students district-wide, but yet the cohort in kindergarten, I'm assuming with the Burr babies, the people that waited, we have 60 additional kindergartners next year going to first grade. So it's a big increase. Do we have any projection, or is this cohort of kindergartners going to be like a blip, do you believe? And then we'll
The
go back?
current year
The current group that we have
is
is
low.
actually going to, well,
And
it's
then-
643 total, but then
So
the,
that's the projection for next year. I'm assuming, what
Right,
I'm
right.
assuming is that the kindergarten class currently that's moving to first grade will always stay as a low number because they were only 9 months, 8 months of students. So-
right, but the group coming in after, in the following year, we're going to be back down into the low sixes.
We should.
Yeah.
My assumption at this point is that because we're back to 12 months of eligible
Right.
5-year-olds, that we will return to kind of what we think of as our standard level per grade. So similar to our current first grade, what will be the second grade for the following year.
Yeah, but if you look, our fifth graders moving on are 682.
Yes,
I mean, these are big groups, 690.
they are.
So those two groups are moving on, but we're going to be bringing in. So there should be a reduction in the number of elementary kids pretty drastically in the next few years.
It seems that way. We'll have to kind of see how it plays out. You know, our kindergarten enrollment projection is always the most variable because
Right.
we really don't know how many will register, but we do monitor that as they're coming in and really try to look at it.
And then one last question. If we did add 15 teachers, what do we have, 5 classrooms, 10 classrooms? I mean, a teacher is a teacher, but then you need a classroom. So are there available classrooms if we should add 15 teachers?
It depends. It all depends on, there's always available classrooms, it just depends on what you want to displace. It would mean putting perhaps specials on more of a cart system where they go to the classrooms versus having their own classroom. You know, we've had situations in the past where due to enrollment, we've had to have these spaces. And we would certainly work at each building if needed to do so. It's just not an easy, these spaces aren't currently vacant. They're currently being used for instruction. It would just mean a shift into classroom instruction as opposed to that being a music room, or that being an art room perhaps, or that being a separate ESOL space, so.
Gail?
Can I just clarify, the class size is set by the state, or is it set by the town?
We've set our class size. I know the question came up, is there a state maximum? I think that was what you're referring to.
But the class size that we have now is set by the town?
By the
not
Board of Ed.
By the Board of Ed, okay, thank you.
Other questions? If I may say to that last point, yes, set by the Board of Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, but guided by guidance that is we strive to align with guidance provided, but we ultimately do set the standard.
So Lorna, I'm just curious, when did we set that? Because is that something we voted on? I may not have a good. It's an policy.
I believe the last time you guys addressed or adjusted it was over a decade ago, if I remember correctly.
Okay, thank you.
And again, they're guidelines, they're not as set in stone. They're guidelines, and the goal, I believe the language states that we will do everything we can to implement within these guidelines.
Yes, Claire.
And if I understand, there are many districts in the state that don't have numbers, don't have guidelines.
I don't know. My assumption would be that every district has guidelines. I don't know how well they're publicized or what they would be.
Ethan.
was just trying to understand the schedule. On page 20 of the supplemental data, preschool budget, it shows a net of a net of 55,000 negative, but then there's another 840,000. So is the total cost, the 55 was basically 900,000?
So the preschool program, the costs associated with that are handled in two ways. The cost of all of the teachers for the program, and this is our regular education pre-K program where we have 9 classrooms, is typically covered by parent tuition and grants that we receive. You can see we're towards the middle of the page where it says balance June 30th.
Yep.
That's the running balance in our school special programs fund for the cost of our teachers for those programs. In addition to the teachers, there are other costs that are paid for by the general fund. Tuition, et cetera, is just not able to cover those costs. So where it says costs paid by the general fund, the paraprofessionals for that program, any sort of benefit costs such as Social Security and health and medical are paid by the general fund. So for the budget for 25-26, the general fund is supporting costs of approximately $840,000 for those 9.
So the total is about 900,000.
Well, yes, the 55 is just going to stay in the special
No, I
program.
understand.
So yes,
But, okay.
Correct.
I just wanted to clarify that I understood it.
yep.
Thank you.
Other questions? I'll take one more pan. All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, rich information, lots for us to continue to digest. Teammates do encourage, if there are additional questions that do come up, please share them prior to our next workshop so the team can come with additional questions. But if I'm correct, when we come again, that really is a time for us to ask additional questions and for you to respond to questions. You have given us the bulk of the information. Now it's time for us to reflect and process. So thank you so very much, and we shall adjourn.
No.